Hey, it's James Governor, founder of RedMonk, and I'm here with another founder, a co-founder, Jamie Dobson, co-founder of Container Solutions. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, James. Thanks for having me. You will notice my
Not at
attire.
all. I know that is amazing. There is a great conference called Monkey Gra, and it will be on March 19th and 20th next year, 2026. The theme will be prepping craft. The idea is being prepared in software and in life. So basically a bit of resilience, and basically thinking about the things we need to do to be prepared, because it seems like uh, systems are just ready to give us a slap in the face at the moment. So, but we don't want to talk about that. What we want to talk about today is Jamie Dobson's work. He has created a great book that, well, I've read. I've enjoyed it a lot. I think most people that have read this book have found it to be, a bit of a cracker. It's been called a page turner. It's sort of it's been called a murder mystery. Actually, maybe it wasn't murder mystery, but
I'm
but
hyped.
it's a heist, not a murder mystery. Sorry, it's a heist. And the book is called Visionaries, Rebels, and Machines. And it's got some lessons for us in tech, ask some big questions, some tough questions. But yeah, Jamie, first question. What's the book about?
Well, the title, Visionaries, Rebels, and Machines, only gives a little bit away. The subtitle, How the World Went from Electrification to Cloudification, goes a little bit further. The idea was there are lessons in the past.
Did you say fornication?
Fornication, electrification,
Did you say?
cloudification.
Oh, sorry, cloudification.
Well,
Sorry, I didn't hear
no,
you
no
there,
worries.
Jamie. I thought it was
The whole stupid project started when somebody said, "What's the cloud?" And in trying to answer that question, I found myself going back further and further in time. But then when you go back in time, so basically, as any writer or historian ever sort of drew their bow back in 1799 and let loose an arrow that went all the way through Edison's workbenches, through Bell Labs, the invention of the PC at Xerox PARC, to the cloud. It's never been done. There's a book about PARC, and there's a book about the cloud, and there's a book about Edison, but they're all very much deep dives. So where is that love journey? It's a relay race of stories. And the thing is, I'm a cheeky. Can I swear, James? I don't think I can swear on your podcast.
well. I mean, I just totally derailed it by talking about fornication. So I think we
Californication.
better. I
Well,
mean, yeah, right. Let's jump into some swears then.
well,
Yes,
so what? So
absolutely.
well, I forgot what I was going to say now. What was
Well,
when
the arrow had shot all the way to the beginning. You were saying that lots and lots of books about systems thinkers, and yet there was not a systems view of the emergence of all of these systems.
So I was a cheeky bastard. I've been trying to tell people for years computers are stupid. They just do things very fast. You shouldn't be scared of them. But people don't believe me. They say you're only saying that
Mhm.
because you're clever. And I'm like, I'm not that clever. Right? If I was clever, I'd have done physics at school, right? Instead of computer science. So
Mhm.
the the point is I was a cheeky bastard because basically in chapter 1 I said this is a light bulb. And then in chapter 2, I say, "Oh, this is a light bulb with a wire in it, and it amplifies the signal." And then a few chapters
Mhm.
later, I say, "Oh, this very small thing does exactly what the vacuum tube did. It's called a transistor." And then before you know it, you've got microchips, microprocessors, computers in the cloud. And the idea was to leave the reader feeling clever and engaged. And wow, now I know a fuck ton of concepts about computing that I would have never have learned if I had to start with the cloud or with a computer. I built it up very cheekily. That
In
was the
that in
point.
that
That was the
case,
point.
then, so who's who is your reader, Jamie? I mean, is it for nerds? Is it for fake nerds, real nerds, business people that might want to learn? What, like,
It
who's your reader?
it
If you
wasn't meant
need to trick them into enjoying the technological explanations, who do you
it
reckon your reader
wasn't
is?
it wasn't meant to be the nerds. It wasn't meant to be me or you or our friends in the community, but our friends in the community read it and liked it because I think they saw
Yeah.
themselves in the story. The original plan, complete mea culpa, was around content marketing from our work at Container Solutions. We had this great book,
Mhm.
Cloud Native Transformation, Patterns of Change. All the middle managers and the team leads love it. It's technical, it's dense, it's done well. People read it and they give us a call. But then from a business strategy, it's like, right, if only I could speak directly to executives at the airport. So I need to write a more general purpose book. That was how it started. But then those crazy kids at the DevOps meetup in London asked me to do a talk when I was almost finished with the book. Not quite, but almost. And there were
Yep.
lots of young people there. And they asked me at the end to, speak to them about the olden days. So obviously I was feeling dead chuffed. I was there and there was a bunch of people and all excited. And I was excited because I don't get out much. And
Yep.
these people said, can we speak to you about the olden days? So I started thinking, yeah, cool. Mainframes, no problem. And the microprocessor. And they stopped me and they said, no, sorry, we mean in the 90s, just before we were born. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
that's what they wanted to talk about. Where does the cloud come from? And I was like, oh my God. So there was another reader, the young recent graduate, a computer programmer or designers or people who were moving into tech and actually didn't know how they got from there to here. So in a way,
Yeah.
they became the next reader.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that just comes through so strongly. I mean, you talk about that sort of that arrow shooting through time. As there are just lots of different points at which you can stop and enjoy the sort of the innovation journey that we've been on. Um, how did you? I think from my perspective, I mean, you had to do a really good job of like saying no to ideas, right? Like, so to write this book and like, uh, so for me, it's Apple barely gets a mention, right?
Fuck them.
Apple is sort of yeah. We've done the Xerox PARC, and then we're like, well, surely now we're going to find out how Apple became this dominant company
Yeah.
and changed the world. And Jamie's like, nah, we're not going to talk about that.
It was difficult, James. It was difficult, and I upset a lot of people on the way. So, for example, back at ARPA in the late 70s, when Steve Jobs was running off with the PC, Vince Cerf came up with the TCP IP protocols. He only gets a one
Mhm.
sentence mention. And my friend Adrian Moat read a few drafts and was saying, "Where's this person? Where's that person?" And he wasn't wrong. And unbelievably, Claude Shannon doesn't get a mention. Does not
Right.
get mentioned. Claude Shannon, who he was to software what the transistor was to the hardware element. So 50% was just making very difficult decisions. And I've actually got chapters about Shannon and about other that just are not in the book. So there was definitely a taking away element that was hard. However, I helped myself by doing the following. There's three ways you can look at an electrical circuit. There's the way the physicists.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's, yeah.
There's one view of the circuit. It's the physicist's view. Electrons and currents moving around. Number one. Number two, there's the gadget view of a circuit. You put something on it, a light bulb, a receiver, and it becomes a thing. But the third way of looking
Hmm.
at an electrical circuit is informational. That when you close a circuit, a signal can be sent. All of the things I talk about to do with information processing. So I don't talk about the radio because that's more on the gadget end of the spectrum. I don't mention that in the book, but the main point is we're going from Edison's workbench, and the arrow is the arrow of the informational sciences. That's why we go from Edison's effects through to cloud computing. That allowed me to frame it. So that meant that Marconi is not in. It means that John
Yep.
Logie Baird television is not in. But so that was easy. However, choosing which of the Visionaries, Rebels, and machines to keep in around computing was definitely challenging. And I think if there's going to be a version two, so to make up for the Claude Shannon issue, I am going to dedicate a
Mhm.
full two part episode to Shannon on the podcast, which comes along as a complementary sort of set of content to go along with the book.
Okay. And so partly, so Amazon works, they claim to work backward from the customer. Because you were working backward from Amazon, you had to say, no, you're not allowed in. I'm not going to, but there is going to be a second book, is there? That's a thing?
Well, no. So what I'm doing right now, I'm having a lot of fun. I hope my listener and my readers having a lot of fun. I'm now on Substack, and every time there's a podcast, a supporting podcast, uh,
Hmm.
welcome to Visionaries, Rebels and Machines. My name is JB, that type of thing. And the first chapter, the
I
first
think you should always speak like that, Jamie. Jamie, I want you to do the rest of the podcast like that.
So the first episode was about Volta and his frog's legs, and that's absolutely brilliant because basically people say, "Oh, well, he invented the battery, so what?" And I'm like, "What the fuck? He invented the battery for the very first time humanity had a continuous current. It had never been done before." And at the same time,
Mhm.
people were thinking, if that electricity can move a frog's leg, maybe we don't have a soul, and maybe there's not a god. So everything changed with the battery. I didn't have time to put that into the book. So episode one is an exploration of Voltaire, Mary Shelley and Frankenstein. It's all
Yeah.
connected. And then the idea is that
Have you seen the new film yet?
I
Have
can't
you
wait for that.
engaged?
When is it
I
out? When's it
mean,
out?
it's out now. I mean, you gotta. Should we? Maybe we should arrange a viewing together, Jamie, because I
I
really
can't.
want to see it.
I
I
saw. I
mean,
saw it was coming out on Netflix, and I thought I've got to see Frankenstein. And anyway, so I don't know if there's going to be a book two, but there's definitely short articles on Substack, the philosophy of the battery, the machine itself,
right.
a little expose of Voltaire. It links back to the podcast, and the idea is that we're going on a rampage from 1799 right the way back to the future, and it's all going to end on my 50th birthday next August. That's the idea. And if the
Okay.
episodes are any good, if the sort of what we record is any good, that'll form the basis for either an ebook or a sequel. But the most important
Okay.
thing is to finish the podcast and finish the Substack. And I'm desperate, James, to fight against the enshittification of the internet. All of the content is coming from me. It's all curated. There'll be links to books, to papers, and bread trails. I'm going to do a little bread trail and say, okay, you're a leader. This is where you can go to learn about psychological safety. You're a techie. This is how you can learn about that. So it's my gift slash bit of fun between now and when I become 50 next August.
Okay. So psychological safety. When I was reading your book, um, it was quite interesting because in fact, my book was published yesterday. Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So, it's a book about what we call progressive delivery. It was written with Kimberly Harrison, Heidi Waterhouse, and Adam Zimmern, and it's really about we just felt that there was sort of some missing aspects. When you think about CI/CD and where we've come on this long journey through Agile, there are some things that you could do that are based on sort of cloud and cloud abundance and cloud automation that you couldn't frankly do, um, or it was very expensive and hard to do when the giants that put it's sort of if you think about the kind of work the people like Martin Fowler or Jez Humble were doing. I mean, it was if you were going to have two instances, if you were going to do a blue-green deployment, Fowler talking about a blue-green deployment, right? It was literally two massive systems that you needed to have next to each other, each with expensive Oracle database licenses, expensive networking gear, just Cisco stuff. Probably, I don't know, whatever it was, the customer's using EMC storage. And you had to have two of them that you would, deploy the application to in order to see how obviously some sophisticated sort of routing there. But you had to have two entire infrastructures if you wanted to do a blue-green deployment.
Right.
That's really expensive and really hard. So without virtualization, super hard. Virtualization changed things a bit, but the cloud and cloud abundance meant that suddenly it's like, why would you only have two of things? You you could have a bunch of things and see which one works best, and start really thinking about the user and the how the user feels about the application that you're rolling out. And we're seeing that in AI now. Actually, I mean, we're seeing people, they'll have 8 different agents spin up a different version of the application that you might deploy. It's abundance thinking. It's a very different way of thinking about the world. And so we've just tried to capture all of that. Now, what I was actually going to say is that one of the in the book, we had to talk about the notion of psychological safety and what we're trying to develop as an organization in order that we can experiment and in order that we can roll out applications confidently and safely on a Friday afternoon, and the sort of culture you need to get there. And so I was really well. A couple of things happened. A, your book is annoyingly good, Jamie. I was I was really fell in love with the authorial voice. I thought it was excellent, and I had to beat myself up a lot and just feel like here are some things that I and my co-authors could have done. But psychological safety, what's that, and why is that so important?
Psychological safety, it feels like a modern term. It is important, but in a nutshell, it's about having a tolerance for failure. So many things, many companies come to me and ask, we want cloud, we want multiple experimentations, but they're terrified of failure, or failure is something that other people do. So psychological safety, as we know it today, the Amy Edmondson version of psychological safety is that
Mhm.
it's a group level phenomena where people feel safe to fail. They feel that if they try something and it goes wrong, they won't be criticized or humiliated or punished in any other way. It's a group condition. That's what Edmondson figured out. So if we were working in a team together, James, and I wanted to try something a little bit mad and a bit random, there would be no fear
Mhm.
in the back of my mind that later in the pub or at the end of the week, in retrospective, I would be told off or punished or told that was a mistake. It's such a difficult thing to build. It's easy to lose once you've got it, but to build that,
Mhm.
the leader, the person in charge needs to model that behavior. They need to own up to mistakes. They need to control the urge when something goes wrong to move into that punitive mode. Everybody does that. If you spend 50 grand on an experiment, it's blown up. And if you're a reasonably small company, of course, your first reaction is to go, well, could we have done anything different? That's actually not a bad question. But oh, what have you done there? Yada yada yada. So without psychological safety, it becomes impossible to experiment. And all of your work into progressive delivery and experimenting our way forward or growing through failure into the future requires that psychological safety to be there. So you cannot, and this happens to me all the time, it appears in the book, you cannot say, I want to do experiments and I want to be cloud native and I want to be out like Netflix. And I'm not going to do the psychological safety thing. Then you're just kidding yourself. This is the foundation of that and not the other way around.
Right. And I think that comes through really strongly in the book, and interestingly, because it's a book about technology, but because it's a book about innovation, it is a book about culture, and yeah, particularly this organizations that succeed in delivering sort of breakthrough. I'll call them digital um, products and services today, but certainly these breakthroughs. Y- y- that's what comes through. You've got to be able to fail.
You've got
That's the
so
fundamental.
the great thing about psychological safety and the culture of teams is it proves a really important point. Human nature doesn't change, technologies do. So the exact same environment that gave rise to the incandescent light bulb at Menlo Park, which was Edison's little research laboratory, the same culture that produced those artifacts is exactly the same culture that they have at Netflix. Of course, the technologies in between have changed. How do you get that? There's two very simple rules to create an environment where psychological safety is there and that will produce innovations and breakthroughs. Low bureaucracy, just get rid of it. It
Mhm.
completely kills the flow of information. And of course, lots of information. Thomas Edison, people think of him as an inventor. He was primarily a fantastic manager. He knew how to deal with people. All these German snobs who came to Menlo Park, he used to haze them. He's tried to bring them down to the American pragmatist level. Not because he was a sadist, but because they were building stuff there. We didn't care about people's history. We cared about people's future. Robert Oppenheimer, my absolute, I love. I call him Robert. It's weird that I call him Oppie. That was a nickname he picked up when he was at university in Leiden. I didn't
Okay.
need to become an expert on Oppenheimer.
So you must have loved it when the film came out because you were already,
The
or
problem
you
is,
might hate the book, the film,
no,
but
I love the film. I love the
you were
film.
deep in your love of Oppenheimer, and then this
No,
sort of amazing view of it comes out as a film. That must have
the
been
thing
wild for
is, so
you.
I've got it on my desk. I've got multiple copies of this book. So this is Kai Bird and Sherwin's American Prometheus. it's the film adapts it so well, and I know this book so well that actually nothing appeared in the film that I didn't understand. Some of the lines I'd memorized. It's a fantastic film, but I didn't appreciate it like others did because I knew the story back to front. Oppie
Right.
was a clever man, really clever, charming, uh, but he was a brilliant manager. What does he do in Los Alamos? What does he do? Brings people in, smashes the hierarchy,
Mhm.
has a fight with General Groves, who wants to compartmentalize exactly like we do in big businesses. And Oppenheimer's like, we need to break down bureaucracy. Information must flow. He said, security might cost us the race, but a lack of information definitely will. So Oppenheimer, more than anything, was cast in the role of manager, which of course may feel like a bit beneath him. And I'm like, why don't am I mad? Am I the only person who sees Oppie as a fantastic manager and Edison as a fantastic manager? That's what they were. And my book is meant to inspire other managers that hey, there's nothing wrong with management. It's a noble profession, and you can do a lot of good work with it.
I mean, that's a huge question on our industry, isn't it? Are you an IC? Are you a manager? You know, the work of people like Charity Majors that talks about this a lot.
I love Charity Majors' work, by the way. I love her stuff on leadership.
Sorry.
I love
Oh, amazing.
brilliant stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. You can learn so much from every blog post she writes. Yeah, Charity is just amazing. I mean, it was funny again thinking about your work on what it means to have effective management in tech. I've just started reading um, Sarah Drasner's book on engineering management, and yeah, questions about trust, how you get a team to work together, the importance of values, the fact that different people may have different values. You need a way of navigating that so they can collaborate together. This stuff is super hard. But I want to ask actually a question about Edison. Did you feel any, I mean, did you feel some sort of responsibility to reclaim Edison? I think these days, everyone wants to be like, oh no, Edison was the bad guy. Uh, Edison he was just out there like, killing elephants and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, we should not admire Edison. There's an alternative history in which, Tesla, who had not been screwed over by Edison, is able to make a better and brighter future for us all. I mean, was there an aspect of reclaiming Edison?
100%. And a lot of that, I started to fight for Edison after the first drafts came out because people said to me, "You've committed a." One of my friends, he said, "You really committed a crime because he was a bastard, right?" And and you've not. You should have. He said, "One sentence would have done it. I just want to." And I'm like, "Well, okay." But I didn't just make it up. I'm surrounded by papers and books about Edison, and this bastard view of Edison is not shared by historians and biographers who are way more talented than I am. And so the
Right.
question is, where does this come from? Was it jealousy? That seems like a sensible place to start. He was very, very successful, both in terms of his output and in terms of his wealth creation. He became very rich. Is it jealousy? Is this what people said about him? If you succeed for long enough, because there's lots of people out in the world that don't like me either. And that's because for 10 years, I was a leader and I wasn't afraid to lead. I made decisions. Some of my decisions benefited the group, but not universally. Some
Mhm.
people did not benefit from my decisions. So it's easy to say, oh, Jamie's a bastard. Well, you reverse that and put them in my shoes. What decisions would they have made? So if you lead
Well,
people,
some very effective operators are bastards, Jamie. I mean,
that,
if we're, we've got a rather rich chap in the world at large right now who clearly is capable of getting some stuff done. But also, I mean,
yeah,
it'll be quite interesting to see how our history looks back on Elon Musk, right?
he will not be in the book of Visionaries, Rebels, and Machines Part 2. He won't make it. He won't make the cut. He
Right.
won't.
He's not. I
He's
don't think he does much on psychological safety, Jamie.
no, but I don't like Elon Musk. The comparison between him and Edison is really unfair. Edison. So this is the rough way this goes. Oh, Elon Musk. He's not really invents anything. He's a cuckoo. He goes in there, pushes the founders out, and he claims Tesla for himself. He didn't actually do any work, and therefore he's like Edison because Edison did that. What? It's like really? Did Edison really do that? I thought Edison invented the incandescent light bulb and the phonograph, and he spent 10 years trying to do some mining that didn't work, and he invented the film industry as we know it today. He did all of that. He didn't steal that. At one point, he was so famous, if you were an inventor, and it's very hard to be an inventor and an innovator and a businessman, Edison would say to people, listen, I'll be able to reverse engineer that and come up with something better in a pretty short amount of time. Why don't you sell me the patents? We'll stick the Edison brand on it and we'll both get rich. That was a tactic of his towards the end of his life when he was very, very famous.
Right.
He gave people a choice. This is where the comparison between Edison and Musk comes, that tiny thing. But that was only one part of Edison's work. So was he a bastard? I don't think he was. The Nikola Tesla thing, the current wars came after he invented the incandescent light bulb. So don't forget, I said this was an arrow shot in the spirit of computation. All of the conflict
Yeah.
with Tesla came later. Now, the next thing where it went wrong, where Edison gets cast as being a bastard, is because of what he did with the film industry. He invented the camera, I can't remember what it was called, Edison's City Motion, it had a strange name. And he had this idea that you could only license this stuff from him. This was a mistake.
Hmm.
So people were like, oh no, we're going to make an alternate version. And actually, Edison controlled a lot of the places you could film in New York. And in any case, the light was bad. So people ran away from Edison because they didn't want to pay these subscription fees and to use this patented stuff. And that's how Hollywood began. So Hollywood began
Okay.
with great light and Thomas Edison wasn't there. So yes, he annoyed a lot of people when the birth of the film industry arrived. But I think people knee-jerk that he's an awful person without really thinking about it. And I don't see any evidence in there to suggest he was particularly evil. He wasn't a very good first husband. So Mary Stywell eventually died, officially of complications because of an illness, but she was heavily self-medicating on drugs. So it could be suicide in small increments, but either way, she
Mhm.
died a neglected and lonely woman looking after two children that Thomas Edison barely saw.
That needs to be on the account. And it's again, uh, it's not ideal if you're doing psychological safety at work and you're not giving your family psychological safety. That is not a trade-off that I think either of us would be willing to make.
You asked me earlier about the people I left out the book. I have a genuine sadness that I couldn't find a space to mention the women behind the men I talk about. And I also genuinely regret not being able to unearth the women visionaries and rebels in the stories of visionaries, rebels, and machines. It's not that they didn't exist, they've been airbrushed out of history. There's a mental note somewhere in there that I'm going to go digging and try to reclaim some of the lost figures of our history. This only,
So I don't need to bash you for that because that was one of the things that sort of struck me in the book. I was,
do you know
I was
what?
definitely waiting.
Do you know what? It came to me really late. I worked really hard on the research. I really, really did. It came
Mhm.
to me late in the day. So there are two women that spring to mind. Lynn Conway, who invented, I think, a process for designing microchips. And then, of course, a famous woman from England. You maybe have to help me.
By the way, you've got to see some comics that my friend Jim Bolton makes.
Yeah.
So Jim makes comics of figures in tech history. You got to meet Jim. He's an amazing storyteller. He's brilliant. You two will get along. But also these comics are amazing, and he's got a comic of Lynn Conway that is it's really nicely done. So yeah, and so he, luckily enough, I think, sort of, or at least so he speaks to the people, like, let's make sure that we capture
Yeah.
some of this in their own words, and they're lovely comics, brilliant history, and I think the two of you, maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's another podcast, but we'll all have a pint together first.
I'd love to speak to him. So Lynn Conway was a trans woman who left a remarkable footprint on the world that we live in. She started work at Xerox PARC, and then went on to develop this chip design process, the Mead Conway design revolution. It's called. but it all came to me at the last moment. And if you think that this was easy for me, I spent one day like looking pale, and I said to my editor, I've committed a crime. I've contributed to the airbrushing. I've contributed to a great historical crime. And then of course Steve Shirley was on my radar. Steve Shirley is actually
Yeah,
Stephanie Shirley, but she told
yeah,
everybody
amazing.
her name was Steve because nobody wanted to deal with a woman. And there's loads of these stories, and it came to me late, and I was close to exhaustion at the end of the book. And my
Mhm.
editor Bev said, "You're gonna have to do it in the next edition. You've got to ship." And in
Right,
the end,
you
that's what
know,
I did.
when I read it, it was noticeable. Um, I don't think it's unforgivable. You're aware of it. You're gonna, you're gonna do the work, as they say, with later editions. Um, and it is harder because, if we think about, sort of invisible figures, if you're reading history, it is hard to know. Actually, there is a layer of history that we're lacking because that airbrushing
Well,
has been a thing, unfortunately.
so because they're invisible, you don't stumble across them. So it was only at the end of the book when my digging was so deep did I actually come to these women. So I'm not using it as an excuse. And then
Yeah.
even the Lovelace thing, Ada Lovelace is a powerful figure in her own right. And recently she has become recognized as such. But for most of the last century, she was Charles Babbage's muse. Now, when you start reading about
Hmm.
Lovelace, this is utter nonsense. She was the powerhouse in that relationship. He was another
Absolutely.
divering idiot. Um, and then you get to that weird Victorian period where women don't contribute as much because it was such a break of gender roles. You get Alexander Graham Bell, another bumbling idiot. I mean, I really can't stand him. And you get his poor wife, who basically propped him up. Her job was to manage his emotions and then motivate this unmotivated and unmovable Scott. She's the real hero in that story. So in a way, I've contributed it to it. I have, and that's on me. And now I need to do something about that.
Well, I mean, first episode, I think you've got to own it. It's better than saying it's not a thing. So, but yeah, we don't. I'm not. Well, let's. I think we had a slight gear change. But yeah, I think that's something I look forward to seeing in your future works. The some again, and I didn't know actually when we. I mean, obviously I'm an inveterate planner. I plan everything down to the very last detail, so I knew exactly how this conversation would go before we started. But um, I I was interested in this notion of sort of innovation and how it works, and in particular, you described some of the characteristics. So first of all, I'll ask, what are the characteristics of successful innovation engines, successful organizations that innovate? So I'll ask you that first, and then I'm going to ask a second question. So yeah, what are the you looked at archetypes in the book. Like, what do you see as the archetypes of successful organizations that can innovate and create new and breakthrough digital products and services?
Okay, so innovation is a bit like pornography. It's a bit hard to describe, but you know it when you see it. Most people don't understand innovation is quite mysterious. Nobody, there's books about this. Does it come from flashes of inspiration? However, there are patterns. There are broad brushstrokes of patterns.
Hmm.
The first thing is that so innovation is slow. It tends to bubble up. After Voltaire discovered the battery, and I say discovered because it was waiting to be discovered, he unearthed it like an archaeologist. 30 years it took for somebody to take the battery and put it into the telegraph. So the process of doing something sensible with battery took a very long time. That was number one. Number two, all innovation is combinations of existing things. So if you look at the battery, the discs and the wires coming out, and then look at the telegraph, physically it's almost identical. Well, the wires keep coming, and then at the end of the wires there's a hammer to tap out dots and dashes on a piece of paper. So you think, well, why was the telegraph earth shattering? It went viral. It changed the world. It changed how we speak to each other. It changed everything. The
Hmm.
Associated Press came out of the telegraph. The Western Union did. Why? Why did the battery not have such an effect? Well, that's because the telegraph was the hardware I just described, recombined with a very ancient technology, language. The dots and dashes and the small communication channel between you and I that is bound by words. So it was two ideas melted in the telegraph: the hardware and then the notion of language. So innovation is quite mysterious, but it's always recombatant. Is that even the right word? It sounds like it's something from Mortal Kombat. Correct,
Recombatant.
right. I don't
I
claim to
mean, I
have the
think
best vocabulation in the world.
we're in the right ballpark, Jamie. I mean, I think people know what you mean.
So those environments that have done well allow these ideas, for want of a better word, to meet each other, marry, have sex, and the consummation of those marriages are new ideas. So Edison's light bulb is just that battery again, but instead of having a sounder on the end, like in the telephone, he stuck a light bulb on the end. So these ideas have got to swirl around. Ideas have sex in between the ears of, human beings.
God, we're obsessed with it today, by the way, Jamie. I shouldn't have said fornication at the beginning.
It's you
I mean,
started this. You
I've really set you off. I mean,
You
blimey.
started this. And so then if you look at container
I'm really,
solutions, just to use
really
as an
holding it.
example, we
Yeah.
designed the company to be flat, to be open. We didn't have any Google 50% rule, but we're always looking for uh, ways to create space. And so if you look at the external secrets operator, it's a tiny, tiny example. We didn't start it, but in the mode when we first got our hands on it, we were component builders. And ESO, it's a secrets operator for Kubernetes, whatever. So we were building on existing technology, but then the next thing was to be like, well, how do we find use cases for this? All of this requires space and time. In my role back then as the chief exec, if I'd have said, what is the return on investment? When are we going to see a payoff from this? If, in other words, I'd have paralyzed the whole operation by bringing bureaucracy into it. ESO would have never got off the ground, and then later never would the CCF. So Xerox PARC, Container Solutions, Netflix, they create space for ideas to bubble up, to meet, and then to become the next thing. Of course, all of that requires psychological safety, which we spoke about earlier. And it's challenging because many managers, it all starts with the manager. How tolerant are you for failure? I've got a high tolerance for failure. And I trust people. I've built a lot of big computer systems. And if one of my engineers says, I've got this hunch, I just say, follow it.
Mhm.
Just follow it. I don't care about the 20, 30, 40 grand that, we're going to spend in terms of salaries and licenses. Just go for it. And let's talk again in 4 months. Not many managers can do that. And in fact, when I
No.
explain
Can
this,
this, Jamie, can this only happen at the beginning of the process? Because to me, I look at, so if we think about the names you're mentioning, and right now, if you talk to or listen to people that are working at or have worked at OpenAI right now, for example, there is an incredible freedom to just fix problems and build things. These organizations, at least within their engineering staffs, are finding ways to enable great innovation, or new stuff. I mean, we both would agree that AI is moving pretty fast. There's a lot of new cool stuff happening. Google's had a good year. 2025 has been amazing for Gemini.
so that
They've had some breakthrough consumer products. Nano Banana crossed over. Notebook LM continues to gain plaudits. Gemini is
and they had their first $1 billion quarter.
so the a very good year for Gemini. Um, but some of the I think my question was it's pretty hard to have psychological safety if everyone's afraid that they're going to get laid off. And to me, so many of the big firms at the moment, um, how are they? How can they possibly be sort of inculcating a feeling that you can fail when the management decisions are so predicated on we're firing people, show me the money right now. It,
Well,
like,
there is something called creative desperation. When your back's against the wall, you come up with creative ideas. It's not very sustainable. My feeling is I don't know what goes on inside these big companies. Your question is, can this only happen in the beginning? Not necessarily, but obviously,
yeah,
look at the telephone company. They've got a product, and then once it's working, it's about scaling, driving down costs, and then broadening reach. Once you're in that cost-cutting operational mode, then of course you're not going to, if your absolute goal is to drive profit margins up by 1%, you're not going to sanction a 50 grand spend on innovation. A lot of companies, it's very sad, a lot of companies' innovation strategy are to buy smaller companies. And not because it's a bad system. It's just because they know that trying to get a company that is so used to driving down costs, increasing revenues, turning the handle on an existing machinery, getting the type of people who run such a machine to then all of a sudden innovate over there, it's just impossible. Psychologically, the people drawn to a large organization have a certain set of character traits. They don't like risk seeking, they don't like novelty, and they have no tolerance for failure whatsoever. That's why they work there and they do a fantastic job. The challenge for big businesses is they come to me and say, "Oh, we want to be Gen AI and we want to do a bit of cloud computing with the same staff," and
Hmm.
that's not possible. Now, it's impossible to innovate in a dangerous environment, I think.
Yeah, I look around and I think orgs, some of them are going to struggle because there's just too much fear. It's really hard to do your best work
Yeah.
if and I mean, I guess that's, I mean, is that something, does innovation, maybe there is a bit of like when the economy is growing, it's easier, or I wonder what the correlation sort of there is. But at the moment, yeah, it's challenging. Not much safety around.
But it's not
So,
to say that
um,
large organizations can't innovate. So Bell innovated remarkably well in the last century through Bell Labs, but under
mhm,
immense pressure from the Department of Justice, it has to be said, they innovated because they could, if their profits went above a certain threshold, it would trigger anti-monopolistic court cases. So they had an incentive to burn their money through Bell Labs, which benefited all of us. And then, of course, you get this weird
mhm,
situation. Xerox could innovate as well. Xerox was a remarkable company. And then they came up with the Palo Alto Research Center that invented the personal computer. So you can't say that they couldn't innovate, but then what they failed to do with the PC was to monetize it, to capitalize on that.
right. See, I would say the innovation is partly the money. I think of the invention, at least this is my definition. The innovation is actually the scaling and the making money from it. The invention, they did the invention, but they didn't take it to market. At least
Yeah,
that's my.
that is, some people do agree with that. I think it's a spectrum. So when does an invention become an innovation? So yes, indeed, an invention is like you imagine a person tinkering, they come up with a component,
Mhm.
but it takes somebody else who can drive out the inefficiencies in that component, then scale it for wider societal use, driving down the cost so you can stick it in the hands of tons of people. Xerox definitely failed to do that. So the moment has to be right, and then thereafter you have to succeed in the scaling. So maybe they did some invention, and then they did the first bit of the innovation cycle, but then unfortunately the last bit of the innovation cycle was Microsoft's and Apple's in that case. They were the big winners.
Yeah. So, on that, I mean, the other thing, and I guess we have to get to this, and some of it's like AI being blamed, but I think, well, I mean, given the subject of the book and the subject of the conversation, light bulb moments is probably a transition here, and um, AI is very real. Um, another book I've been reading, Gene Kim and Steve Yegg's. I don't know if it's Yegg or Yeggy. I need to find out. Their book on vibe coding, and it's interesting because I mean, Yegg is certainly like he's not someone that reflexively jumps on new technology, as they say in the book. Like he was, handwriting, refused to use an IDE, handwriting Java code for the longest time, refused to learn Git, and yet 20 years of his life was building systems at Amazon and Google that probably many of us use on a daily basis,
Mm.
but skeptical, a conservative in terms of technology adoption. But that moment when AI, we realized, bloody hell, this is very real. I mean, I think that's interesting to me because in your book, it's that gear change where we go to, oh, bloody hell. We've come through cloud. We've got the compute that has enabled us to do these things with transformers. We're into AI now. And oh shit, what have we done? You've got this gear change in the book where, yeah, sort of the horrific downer later in the book where you just start to ask questions about will anyone have jobs?
Yeah.
Uh, will we use AI to sort of create viruses that kill us all. You turn into a doomer at the end. And I mean, um, I've got a bit to say about it, but yeah, tell me how you felt. Sort of, the book is quite an optimistic book until suddenly you're like, oh no, when I'm not optimistic anymore. And I mean, you don't, and it's funny because one of the things you talk about is not cars not being able to drive properly. Wait till you go to San Francisco and get in a Waymo, or when they come to London, Waymo is, they feel safer than normal drivers. That's any cab driver I've ever had, a Waymo feels safer. So tell me about that sort of gear change where you're like, actually, things could get bad here, folks.
I think things can get bad. History's arrow makes you think that the way things happen is how they had to happen. So the reason I can be optimistic and joyous about what's been in the past is because I've got the benefit of hindsight. There's a few things that mark my thinking. Some of them are personal, some of them are practical. I think people get excited about killer robots. I wouldn't worry about that. They're going to come, not right now. The real thing to look at, and if you were depressed after reading section 5 of the book, you're going to be even worse when I start talking now. The original quote that said 1% of all the wealth is held by 99% of all the people within this country. What year do you think
Yeah,
that quote's from?
it's got worse, hasn't it?
Well, it has got worse. In the last 5 years, it's got much worse. But what year do you think that
Much
quote was
worse.
made?
Not sure.
1906. 1906 in a book called Poverty. So as the last
Bloody hell.
century,
Okay.
as the last century
Did we
turned,
fix it a bit and then it's gone bad again? Or
well, yes, but we required a First World War and then the Holocaust for it to be fixed, and it was only a temporary fix. So if you really want to get upset about all of this stuff, at the turn of the last century, the big trusts, the big monopolies, AT&T, Rockefeller, and all of these people were hoovering up so much vast wealth that the seeds for social discord were sown. We could not stop that train once it was in motion. Starting with the great crash of 1908, the First World War, all of that building up to the big crash in 28, which inevitably gave Hitler that platform in the 30s. All of the markers that came before the Second World War are now presently within our societies. The financial crash of 2008 is the equivalent to the stock market crash or the Great Depression of the 1930s. That's the most terrifying bit of this whole story. And it's systematic because a computer system or a business based on a computer system consolidates gains and hoovers them up into a very tiny percentage of the population. So it's history that is making me think what comes next might be difficult, challenging.
bad.
But I do say in the book, we've been here before, and there's great hope in that. We have seen this before. We understand what happens when you impoverish billions of people and what they do at the polling station. So we know this. So I think there's a fight back. So this was part of my.
And I mean, you know, and obviously, I mean, podcasts shouldn't be necessarily time specific, but you know, talk about the news. The Democrats had a pretty good day yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, New York's gonna have a new mayor. London and New York are gonna have Muslim mayors. There were all sorts of interesting wins by Democrats actually across the country.
Yeah.
So to your point about optimism, yeah, occasionally humans do take a step. Colorado passed a bill higher taxes on people on higher incomes in order to do free meals in public schools.
Yeah.
So sometimes we do the right thing.
Exactly, and the right thing. So back in the turn of the last century, the Paris Underground and the municipal transport systems were put together not by left-wing do-gooders, but by politicians who were terrified that if working people didn't see some of the gains of the increases in wealth, there would be social unrest. So we know this. History teaches this. Common sense teaches this as well. So there is some hope. We have been through these scenarios before. We may not fall into them again, but I don't think we should be complacent. And this is very difficult for me because if you ever read a book about really deep, dark material, whether it's type of abuse or anything like that, you can only put so much darkness on the reader for so long before they just completely switch off. And I think that's normal. That's human nature. But I'm here trying to say, well, I'd like us to talk about these dark things. I think we've all done well in technology. It's been brilliant for me. I've had a great career. I basically fuck around for a living these days. It's great, right? I read, I talk, I help people, I play with computers. I used to do that for fun before I got a job, and then the day after I got a job, I got paid for it. I think we need to not shy away from these conversations. And chapter 5 or section 5 is about trying to hold the industry to account, hold myself to account, and start to say, listen, if we can't predict the future, we won't be able to shape it. And those who can't construct the past cannot predict the future. And if we zone out now, the future will belong to the Elon Musks of the world. And we can't let that happen. So this is part of the fight back. And then I think the second part is that I came from a deindustrialized city, and I witnessed the miners' strike on TV. This wasn't abstract. This was happening in my community. Government policy,
Hmm.
when it goes wrong, leads to the childhood I had and the city I was raised in. So technology change will always come. There will be winners and losers, but policy choices by governments will dictate what happens to most of us thereafter. So there's a part of section 5 is advice, policy advice. Well, this is happening. The potential for people to become very rich is happening. What can we do to make sure we all get to use these technologies and we all get to be paid fairly and to benefit? It's never going to be 100% equal, but how can we all win right now? Because if we all win, we might intercept the social unrest that potentially could follow up if we don't solve that
Yeah,
equation.
through AI.
I,
And
I didn't mean
I
to,
was at a
I didn't mean to depress you.
conference yesterday. No, no. I mean, I think people have to read the book. It's a great book. Section 5, nightmare. But you got to read it. We got to be clear sighted. Well, for me at least, uh, I care about people. Yep, this is stuff you need to think about. I have a family. We want them to be safe. If you think about, you talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the book and self-actualization. I mean, you have to start with safety. Psychological safety is one thing in an organization, but if you don't have a roof over your head, uh, food on the table, that stuff is super important. And obviously I want, me, you, our kids, our families, everyone on this podcast and the wider world to have, those base levels. And yeah, I think we do have to fight for them. But I did yesterday. I was at an AI conference, and I'm very used to, and there were loads of amazing people there, like building amazing stuff. And there's like vision models and voice models, and there's all sorts of startups building this cool stuff. And it's like, oh, this is amazing! Look at this thing they built, and robots, and all sorts of amazing things that may or may not take jobs. And they're basically their pretty clear goal to make money. And I went to have lunch, and I just started talking to this chap. His name is Bruno Suarez, and I asked him what he did. He said, "I'm an oncologist,"
Right.
and I was like, "What's an oncologist like doing at an AI conference in Lisbon?" And he said, "Well, I am an oncologist, and one of the really important things is how." Like people report on their symptoms, particularly not the symptoms of the cancer, but the side effects of the medicines we give them, because the medicines we use are tremendously invasive. They really hurt people. And if they take too much of them, it can shorten their life, and it can certainly ruin their quality of life in any life that they have. And we're really not very good at this stuff. There are global standards to lay out reporting for symptoms. Um, he kept on using the example of diarrhea, and I was trying to eat my lunch, and I'm like, dude, but he's an oncologist, and he didn't even think about that as a thing. But the sort of 7 levels of, and what does it mean, and how do we have a consistent way of reporting on our symptoms? And there is a French healthcare company. They've got one which is quite rigid in classification, and he was actually just pushing back and saying that his organization and the patients that they were dealing with, they should build their own system using, and he was, building a proof of concept. He had built a proof of concept. It was LLM based. Immediately someone else came and said, you should use an SLM, use small language models. But basically, he built it so that the patients could use WhatsApp. They could talk to the machine, and it would turn that into standard reporting. And he obviously was quite worried about making sure there weren't hallucinations, into standard reporting on the effects of the drugs on their lives.
Yeah.
And for me, as I say, I mean, there's people out there that say AI doesn't work. There are people out there that say it's all bad. I was really taken with the possibilities and the potential with this wonderful guy Bruno, and I'm gonna try and get involved, help him where I can, because if you can help one person to live a better life, one cancer patient, then that's amazing. And he was absolutely there was no way he could have done it without AI.
Bruno may or may not succeed, but somebody like Bruno will. One of the huge lessons of Visionaries, Rebels and Machines in the history of tech is that the destiny of a general purpose technology does not lie in the hands of its inventors. It lies in the hands of users. That's what Bruno is. So after the hype,
He is, exactly.
yeah. So after the hype, practitioners, people who don't give a shit about social media, will get busy and they will find brilliant use cases. There's loads exist already. A generative AI stethoscope, you put it on your heart, it does what a stethoscope does, sends a bunch of data back to a cloud, and then says, "Oh, you might have this, this, and this." Way more accurate than a human being. I'm not worried about that. I think finding use cases for generative AI is already massively in progress, and in 10 years' time, we'll see some great use cases. Will it be the end of work? I think some jobs will vanish. I think some basic jobs will vanish. I don't think LLMs can do what humans can do, but I use Claude to do all kinds of things, mainly around planning. I know what I'm asking Claude to do. So now I can do in 5 hours what I used to do in 15 hours. Great. It's a production boost. So
Oh my goodness, as an author, I've just started using Whisperflow. Whisperflow is really good. I don't know if you've used it, Jamie. You might use it when you do your vibe coding too, because Whisperflow, you just open the text area, press the button, and it's really good at transcripts. So anyway, I don't want to go too much. I wanted to end on a high note.
right.
We've got some positives. I think for today, we're gonna cap it now, Jamie. But I want to say thanks so much for joining me. It's been a super conversation. And yeah, once again, I'd say to people watching, Visionaries, Rebels and Machines, absolutely an enjoyable book that helps you understand the world that we're living in today by that time's arrow looking back. And it was a cracking read. And so you should buy it, you should read it. And Jamie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, James.